Sarah Martinez walked into the busy airport security checkpoint at Denver International Airport, her weathered hiking boots clicking against the polished floor. She looked like any other traveler heading home after a mountain adventure. Worn jeans, a simple flannel shirt, and a canvas backpack slung over her shoulder. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and her face showed the healthy glow of someone who had spent days outdoors. The security line moved slowly, filled with business travelers in suits, families with crying babies, and college students clutching their phones. Sarah stood patiently, observing the controlled chaos around her. She had learned long ago that patience was not just a virtue, but often a survival skill. When her turn came, she approached the TSA agent's station with her boarding pass and identification ready. The agent, a middle-aged man named Derek with tired eyes and a coffee-stained uniform, barely looked up from his computer screen. His movements were automatic, the result of checking thousands of IDs every week. "Heading to?" Derek asked in a monotone voice, not really expecting much of an answer. "Washington, D.C., Sarah replied simply, handing over her driver's license. Derek glanced at the ID, then at Sarah, then back at the ID again. Something about the photograph seemed different from the woman standing before him. In the picture, Sarah's hair was shorter and more professional, her expression more serious. The address listed was in Virginia, not Colorado, where she had just been hiking. "This doesn't look like you," Derek said with a slight chuckle, holding up the license. His colleague Maria leaned over to take a look. "Yeah, the hair's completely different," Maria agreed, smirking. "And you look way more serious in this photo. What did you do? Join the military or something?" Sarah remained calm, her expression unchanged. "Something like that," she said quietly. Derek shook his head, still amused by what he assumed was probably an old photo from someone's rebellious phase or perhaps a formal event. "Well, we've all had those awkward ID photos," he said, moving to scan the license into the computer system. The machine beeped as it processed the information. Derek expected the usual green light and basic passenger information to appear on his screen. Instead, the computer took longer than usual to load, the spinning wheel indicating it was accessing additional databases. Sarah watched Derek's face carefully. She could see the exact moment when his casual demeanor began to change. His eyebrows furrowed slightly as he stared at the screen. Then his eyes widened almost imperceptibly. "Is there a problem?" Sarah asked, though she already knew what was happening. Just give me a second," Derek stammered, his voice no longer carrying its earlier amusement. The computer screen was displaying information he had never seen before, codes and classifications that were far beyond his usual clearance level. Maria noticed her colleague's sudden change in behavior. "What's going on, Derek?" Derek couldn't speak. The screen showed a security classification that made his hands tremble slightly. Red text flashed across his monitor, indicating this was no ordinary passenger. The system was requesting additional verification procedures that he had only heard about in training, but never actually encountered. Sarah stood perfectly still, watching as both agents struggled to process what they were seeing. She had been through this before, though not often when traveling in civilian clothes. Usually her military transport or official business trips involved different protocols entirely. "Ma'am," Derek finally managed to say, his voice now respectful and somewhat nervous. Could you please step aside for a moment? We need to make a quick verification call." Other passengers in line began to grow impatient, wondering why the holdup was occurring. A businessman behind Sarah checked his watch, impatiently, and muttered something about missing his connecting flight. Sarah nodded calmly and moved to the designated area where passengers usually waited during additional screening procedures. She wasn't concerned about the delay. She had built extra time into her travel schedule precisely for situations like this. Derek picked up his secure phone with shaking hands. He had to call his supervisor, but even his supervisor might not have the clearance level to handle whatever classification was appearing on his screen. The codes indicated something far beyond the typical VIP passenger alerts they occasionally encountered when politicians or celebrities traveled through their checkpoint. As Derek dialed, Sarah caught sight of her reflection in a nearby window. She understood why the agents had initially been amused. After a week of hiking in the Colorado Rockies, she looked nothing like the person who regularly briefed Pentagon officials or coordinated with international intelligence agencies. The mountains had been her escape, her way of finding peace away from a world where her decisions could affect national security. But now, as the computer systems began revealing her true identity, Sarah knew her quiet mountain retreat was officially over. Within minutes, these security agents would understand that they had just questioned the credentials of someone whose clearance level was so high that most government officials would never even know her real job existed. The transformation from dismissed hiker to recognized operative was about to begin, and Sarah Martinez was ready for whatever came next. Derek's supervisor, Janet Thompson, arrived at the security checkpoint within 3 minutes of his call. Janet had worked at Denver International Airport for over 15 years and had seen her share of unusual situations. But Derek's nervous description had caught her attention immediately. "Show me the screen," Janet said quietly, positioning herself so other passengers couldn't see the monitor. When Derek turned the computer toward her, Janet's confident expression immediately changed. Her 20 years of government service, including a stint with the Department of Homeland Security, had taught her to recognize certain classifications. What she saw on the screen made her heart rate increase significantly. The display showed multiple security flags, but one stood out above all others: SOCOM active, level Omega. Below that, clearance codes she had only heard whispered about in high-security briefings appeared in bright red letters. "Oh my God," Janet whispered, her voice barely audible. "Derek, do you realize what you're looking at?" Derek shook his head, still confused by the technical jargon filling his screen. "SOCOM stands for Special Operations Command," Janet explained in hushed tones. "Level Omega clearance means this person has access to information that could affect national security at the highest levels. We're talking about someone who works directly with military operations that most generals don't even know about." Sarah remained in the waiting area, appearing completely relaxed as she watched the two agents try to process her information. She could see other security personnel beginning to take notice of the commotion. A few experienced agents were making subtle movements toward their station, recognizing the signs of a high-level security situation. Janet approached Sarah with a completely different demeanor than Derek had shown earlier. Her casual government employee attitude had been replaced by the respect typically reserved for visiting dignitaries or senior military officials. "Ma'am, I'm Janet Thompson, the security supervisor here," she said formally. "I apologize for any inconvenience. We're just following standard verification procedures for certain classifications." Sarah nodded, understanding. "I appreciate you following protocol. It's exactly what you should do." Meanwhile, Derek was still staring at his computer screen, trying to comprehend how the woman who looked like she had just finished a camping trip could possess security clearances that exceeded those of most government officials he had ever encountered. The verification call Janet made went to a secure line at Peterson Air Force Base, just 90 miles south of Denver. The voice that answered was crisp and professional. "This is Colonel Hayes, Verification Division. Colonel, this is Janet Thompson at Denver International Security. We have a passenger here with SOCOM level Omega credentials, and we need immediate verification for Sarah Martinez." There was a brief pause on the line. "Hold one moment, ma'am." Sarah could hear the muffled conversation happening behind the security desk. Other passengers were becoming increasingly curious about the delay, with some trying to peek around to see what was causing the holdup. A few frequent travelers who had witnessed similar situations before began to whisper among themselves about possible VIP passengers or security threats. After what felt like an eternity but was actually only 2 minutes, Colonel Hayes returned to the phone. "Ma'am, please put the passenger on the line." Janet walked over to Sarah with the phone. "Colonel Hayes needs to speak with you directly." Sarah took the phone with the same calm demeanor she had maintained throughout the entire situation. "This is Martinez. Major Martinez, this is Colonel Hayes. Can you provide your current operational code word?" "Moonlight 77 Alpha," Sarah replied without hesitation. "Copy that. Your verification is confirmed. Please return the phone to security personnel." Sarah handed the phone back to Janet, who listened intently to whatever the colonel was saying on the other end. Janet's expression grew more serious with each passing second. "Yes, sir, understood. Absolutely, sir. Right away." When Janet hung up, she turned to her team with a new sense of urgency. "Derek, Maria, I need you to escort Major Martinez through priority screening immediately. No delays, no questions, complete discretion." Derek's mouth fell open slightly. "Major, she's actually military." "Not just military. Janet corrected him quietly. Special Operations Command doesn't hand out level Omega clearances to just anyone. This woman is involved in operations that protect our national security in ways we'll never even know about. Sarah gathered her backpack and prepared to continue through security. As she walked past Derek, she paused for a moment. "You did exactly the right thing," she told him. "Never let anyone through without proper verification, regardless of how they look or what they claim. That vigilance is what keeps people safe." Derek nodded, still processing the fact that he had initially laughed at the credentials of someone whose job was so classified that even learning about it required special clearance. Sarah moved toward the priority screening area. Other security personnel throughout the checkpoint began to take notice. Word spread quickly through their communication system that they had a high-level military operative in the building, and the entire atmosphere of the security area shifted from casual efficiency to heightened professional awareness. The transformation was remarkable. Within minutes, Sarah had gone from being a dismissed hiker with a questionable ID to being treated with the respect accorded to someone whose work was vital to national security. But for Sarah, this was just another day in a life where her true identity was often hidden behind carefully constructed covers and ordinary appearances. As Sarah moved through the priority screening lane, she noticed how quickly word had spread through the security checkpoint. Agents who had been casually going about their duties were now standing a bit straighter, their movements more purposeful and professional. The change in atmosphere was subtle, but unmistakable to someone trained to observe human behavior. Maria, the agent who had earlier joked about Sarah's military appearance, now found herself assigned to personally escort the woman she had dismissed just minutes before. The irony was not lost on either of them, though Sarah showed no trace of smugness or irritation about the earlier treatment. "Ma'am, right this way, please," Maria said, her voice now carrying the respectful tone reserved for high-ranking officials. She guided Sarah to a separate screening area typically used for diplomatic personnel and other VIP travelers. The advanced screening equipment in this section was different from the standard machines used for regular passengers. The X-ray devices were more sophisticated, the metal detectors more sensitive, and the entire process was designed to be both thorough and expedient for individuals whose time was considered valuable to national interests. Sarah placed her backpack on the conveyor belt, noting how carefully the screening agents were now handling her belongings. Her hiking gear, camping supplies, and personal items moved through the X-ray machine under the watchful eyes of the most experienced security personnel on duty. Behind the main security area, Janet was fielding calls from her superiors. Word of the high-level SOCOM operative's presence had quickly moved up the chain of command, and various officials wanted to ensure that proper protocols were being followed. "Yes, sir, she's being given full VIP treatment," Janet spoke into her secure phone. "No delays, complete discretion, and we're using the diplomatic screening procedures." Meanwhile, Derek remained at his original station, but his mind was far from the routine ID checks he was supposed to be performing. He kept glancing over at the priority screening area where Sarah was being processed, still struggling to reconcile the casual hiker appearance with the reality of her high-level security clearance. A businessman in an expensive suit approached Derek's station, tapping impatiently on the counter. "What's taking so long over there?" he demanded, nodding toward the priority area. "I have a very important meeting in Washington and I can't afford delays." Derek looked at the businessman, then back toward Sarah, who was calmly answering questions from the advanced screening team. The contrast was striking. The businessman was clearly agitated about his commercial meeting, while the woman, who might be heading to brief Pentagon officials or coordinate international operations, remained completely composed. "Sir, please place your ID on the counter," Derek said to the businessman, his voice now carrying a new appreciation for the importance of his job. The encounter with Major Martinez had reminded him that security wasn't just about following procedures, it was about protecting people whose work was vital to national security. Back in the priority screening area, Sarah was answering routine questions about her travel plans. The agents were professional but curious, clearly wondering what kind of mission would take a Special Operations Command officer from the Colorado Mountains to Washington, D.C. "Business or pleasure, ma'am?" asked the senior screening agent, though he immediately realized the absurdity of asking someone with her security clearance about the nature of her travel. "A bit of both," Sarah replied with a slight smile. The pleasure part was the hiking. The business part starts when I land. The agent nodded, understanding that he shouldn't ask for more details. People with level Omega clearances didn't discuss their work with airport security personnel, no matter how well-intentioned the questions might be. Sarah's boots were checked with handheld scanners. Her backpack was thoroughly but respectfully searched, and her personal electronics received special attention from technicians trained to handle devices that might contain classified information. Throughout the process, she remained patient and cooperative, understanding that these procedures were designed to protect both her security and the integrity of whatever classified information she might be carrying. As the screening neared completion, Janet approached with a special escort badge and a concerned expression. Major Martinez, I've been instructed to personally escort you to your gate and ensure you have everything you need for your flight. This level of service was unprecedented for the Denver airport, reserved only for the highest-level government officials or foreign dignitaries. Other passengers in the area began to take notice, with some trying to discreetly photograph or record the unusual VIP treatment being given to someone who looked like an ordinary traveler. Sarah gathered her belongings, now fully cleared through security. Her hiking boots, flannel shirt, and casual appearance remained the same, but everyone around her now understood that appearances could be deeply misleading. As they walked toward the gate area, Janet couldn't help but ask, "Ma'am, if you don't mind me saying, you don't look like what we usually expect from high-level military personnel." Sarah paused in her walking and turned to face Janet. "That's exactly the point," she said quietly. "The best operatives are the ones who can blend in anywhere, whether that's a hiking trail in Colorado, a diplomatic reception in Geneva, or a security checkpoint in Denver. The moment you start looking like what people expect, you lose your most valuable asset, the element of surprise." The wisdom in those words resonated with Janet, who realized she had just learned something important about the nature of covert operations and the people who conducted them. The woman walking beside her might look like someone's outdoor-loving sister or friend, but she was actually a highly trained operative whose work helped protect the very freedom that allowed people to hike in Colorado mountains without fear. As they continued toward the departure gate, Sarah Martinez had successfully transformed from a dismissed traveler to a respected operative, all through the simple process of computer verification that revealed her true identity to people who understood its significance. The walk through Denver International Airport's main terminal with Janet as her escort was unlike any travel experience Sarah had encountered in her civilian guise. Other airport personnel they passed seemed to recognize Janet's special escort badge and the significance of her presence accompanying a single passenger gate. Agents looked up from their computers as they walked by. Airline staff members paused in their conversations, and even cleaning personnel seemed to sense that something important was happening. The subtle shift in attention reminded Sarah why she preferred to travel under deeper cover when possible. "I've never done a SOCOM escort before," Janet admitted quietly as they navigated through the busy terminal. "We get politicians, celebrities, and business executives, but nothing quite like this." Sarah nodded understandingly. "Most people in your position never encounter our kind of clearance. It's designed that way intentionally. The less visible we are in normal circumstances, the more effective we can be when it matters." They passed a coffee shop where Derek was taking his break, still visibly shaken by his earlier encounter. When he saw Sarah walking with the airport's head of security, his coffee cup paused halfway to his lips. The reality of what had just happened was still sinking in. Janet noticed Derek's stare and made a mental note to have a conversation with him later about discretion and the importance of never discussing high-security encounters with other personnel or family members. Some experiences in airport security were meant to remain completely confidential. As they approached Gate B7, where Sarah's flight to Washington, D.C. was boarding, Janet's radio crackled with an urgent message. She listened intently to the coded communication, her expression growing concerned. "Major Martinez," Janet said, lowering her voice, "I'm receiving word that there may be some additional passengers on your flight who have requested security notifications about high-clearance travelers. This isn't unusual, but I wanted to make you aware." Sarah wasn't surprised. Flights between major airports often carried multiple government personnel, contractors, and officials who had various levels of security awareness. Her presence might have triggered automatic notifications to other cleared passengers, just as their presence might be noted in her pre-flight briefing materials. "Thank you for the heads up," Sarah replied. "I assume you're following standard notification protocols?" "Yes, ma'am. Everything by the book." At the gate, the boarding process was already underway. Families with small children, business travelers checking their phones, and vacation-goers organizing their carry-on bags created the typical controlled chaos of airline boarding. Sarah would blend back into this normal world as soon as she boarded the aircraft. The gate agent, a young woman named Christine, had received special instructions about Sarah's boarding process. She was to be given priority boarding along with the first-class passengers and airline elite members, but without any announcements or special attention that might draw unwanted notice from other travelers. "Major Martinez," Christine said quietly when Sarah approached the gate counter. "We have you in seat 3A. You can board at your convenience." Sarah thanked her and turned to Janet for their final interaction. "I appreciate the professional handling of this situation. Your team did exactly what they should have done." Janet felt a sense of pride in her staff's response, particularly given how the situation had started with Derek's casual dismissal of Sarah's credentials. "Ma'am, would it be appropriate for me to brief my team about this type of clearance?" "Not the specifics, but general procedures?" "That would be wise," Sarah agreed. "The more your people understand about different security classifications, the better they can serve both national security and the traveling public. Just remember that discretion is always paramount." As Sarah walked down the jet bridge to board her aircraft, she reflected on how the entire airport encounter would likely become a learning experience for the security staff involved. Derek would probably never again dismiss someone's credentials based on their appearance. Janet would have new protocols to implement, and Maria would have a story she could never tell but would always remember. On the plane, Sarah settled into her first-class seat and noticed two passengers in business class who had given her subtle acknowledgement when she boarded. Their brief nods indicated they were also cleared personnel who had been notified about her presence on the flight. This wasn't unusual. Government flights often carried multiple officials traveling for various classified purposes. A flight attendant approached with a bottle of water and a small envelope. "Compliments of the captain, ma'am," she said discreetly. Inside the envelope was a brief note. "Major Martinez, thank you for your service. We have you scheduled for priority deplaning in D.C., and ground transportation will be arranged as requested. Captain Stevens." Sarah smiled slightly, appreciating the captain's recognition and professionalism. Military pilots often maintained awareness of special operations personnel traveling on their flights, and Captain Stevens was clearly someone who understood the importance of discretion and proper protocol. As the plane prepared for takeoff, Sarah looked out the window at the Colorado mountains she had been hiking just hours earlier. The peaceful wilderness seemed like a different world from the one she was returning to in Washington, where her real work awaited. Her phone buzzed with an encrypted message. "Welcome back to reality, Major. Briefing tomorrow at 0800. Hope the mountains were worth it. Colonel Hayes." Sarah typed back. "They always are. Ready for duty." The transformation from dismissed hiker to respected operative was now complete, and Major Sarah Martinez was heading back to the world where her true identity and capabilities were not only recognized but essential to national security operations that most people would never know existed. The computer verification had worked exactly as designed, protecting her cover while ensuring proper recognition when necessary. The flight from Denver to Washington, D.C. gave Sarah time to mentally transition from her mountain retreat back to her operational mindset. She pulled out a tablet that appeared to be loaded with hiking photos and travel documents, but a casual observer wouldn't notice that her fingers were moving in specific patterns across the screen, patterns that activated encrypted communication systems. 2 rows behind her, Agent Michael Chen was reviewing his own classified materials on what appeared to be a standard business laptop. He had been one of the passengers who received notification about Sarah's presence on the flight, and he recognized her reputation within Special Operations Command circles. Chen was returning from a surveillance operation in California and had heard whispers about Major Martinez's unconventional methods and impressive success rate. In the business class section, Dr. Lisa Park was traveling back from a classified research conference in Colorado Springs. As a defense contractor specializing in advanced communication systems, she held her own high-level clearances and had also received the standard notification about cleared personnel on the flight. She was curious about the woman in first class who had managed to maintain such a low profile while carrying level Omega credentials. Captain Stevens made his routine announcements as the plane reached cruising altitude, but his experienced crew noticed subtle differences in his flight management. They were following a slightly modified flight path. Their communication protocols included additional security checks, and their arrival procedures in D.C. had been adjusted to accommodate priority passenger handling. Sarah finished her encrypted communication session and opened a book, a biography of a famous mountain climber that perfectly matched her cover story. But her mind was already shifting to the briefing that awaited her tomorrow morning. Colonel Hayes's message had been brief, but she understood the urgency behind the early meeting time. The flight attendant approached with another discreet envelope. This one contained updated weather information for Washington, D.C., but also included coded information about her ground transportation arrangements and a subtle warning about increased security at Reagan National Airport due to a recent threat assessment. Meanwhile, back at Denver International Airport, Janet Thompson was conducting a private briefing with her security team. Derek, Maria, and several other agents sat in the secure conference room as Janet explained the importance of maintaining confidentiality about high-clearance encounters. What happened today with Major Martinez is not unusual, but it's also not something we discuss outside this room, Janet emphasized. People with those types of clearances operate in a world where their security depends on maintaining low profiles and flexible covers. Derek raised his hand tentatively. Ma'am, how do we balance being thorough with our security checks without being disrespectful to people who are actually protecting the country? That's exactly the right question, Janet replied. You did your job correctly today. You verified credentials when something seemed unusual. You followed proper escalation procedures and you maintained professionalism throughout. The fact that Major Martinez's appearance didn't match your expectations of a high-level military officer is actually a testament to how good she is at her job. Maria nodded thoughtfully. So when someone looks too ordinary, that might actually be a sign they're extraordinary? In the intelligence and special operations world, absolutely, Janet confirmed. The people who are most effective at protecting our national security are often the ones who can disappear into a crowd or blend into any environment. Today you met someone who could probably walk into a corporate boardroom, a college campus, or a foreign marketplace and fit in perfectly. That versatility is what makes her valuable. Back on the flight, Sarah was approached by Agent Chen, who had moved to the empty seat across the aisle during a bathroom break. Major Martinez? He said quietly. Agent Chen, FBI Counterintelligence. I wanted to introduce myself and thank you for the Bangkok operation last year. My team's work was much safer because of your advanced intelligence. Sarah looked up from her book, recognizing Chen from classified briefings but surprised by his direct approach. Normally, cleared personnel maintained operational security by not acknowledging each other during civilian travel. Agent Chen, she replied carefully, I hope your current assignment is going well. It is, thanks to groundwork laid by SOCOM operations, Chen said. I know we're not supposed to talk shop during civilian travel, but I wanted you to know that your work has real impact on those of us in the field. Their conversation was brief and carefully coded, but it represented something unusual in the intelligence community, direct acknowledgement between operatives from different agencies who rarely had the opportunity to connect their individual missions to the larger picture of national security operations. Dr. Park, observing this interaction from her business class seat, recognized the significance of two high-clearance operatives breaking protocol to acknowledge each other. It suggested either an unusually important upcoming operation or a rare moment of personal connection between people who normally operated in complete isolation. As the plane began its descent into Washington, D.C., Sarah could see the familiar landmarks that marked her return to the world where her true identity was not just recognized, but essential. The Pentagon, the Capitol building, and the Potomac River were all visible in the afternoon sunlight. Her secure phone buzzed with another message. Transportation waiting at Gate C-12. Driver has tactical briefing materials. Welcome home, Major. The message wasn't signed, but Sarah recognized the communication pattern used by her immediate superior, General Patricia Williams. If General Williams was personally coordinating her arrival transportation, tomorrow's briefing was likely to involve something significantly more complex than a routine operational update. Sarah Martinez was about to complete her transformation from dismissed hiker back to active Special Operations Command officer. But the Denver airport encounter had served as an important reminder that her most valuable asset was the ability to be completely underestimated by people who judged based on appearances rather than capabilities. Reagan National Airport in Washington, D.C. was a different world from Denver International. Here, the presence of government personnel, military uniforms, and security officials was so common that Sarah's arrival drew no special attention whatsoever. She blended seamlessly into the crowd of policymakers, defense contractors, and federal employees who made this route between the mountains and the capital a regular commute. At Gate C-12, a woman in a business suit held a sign reading, "Martinez Consulting," a generic cover that could apply to any number of legitimate business travelers. Sarah approached with the same casual confidence she had maintained throughout her journey. "Ms. Martinez?" the woman asked, though her trained eyes had already confirmed Sarah's identity through multiple security indicators. "I'm Agent Lisa Torres, your transportation coordinator." The black sedan waiting outside was unmarked but equipped with communication systems and security features that would be invisible to casual observers. Agent Torres handled Sarah's luggage with the efficiency of someone who regularly transported high-clearance personnel between airports and secure facilities. During the drive through D.C. traffic, Torres provided Sarah with a briefing packet disguised as tourist information about Washington landmarks. The documents inside contained preliminary information about tomorrow's meeting, updated threat assessments for her upcoming assignment, and personnel changes within Special Operations Command that had occurred during her mountain retreat. "General, Williams wanted me to tell you that the Denver airport situation has been noted and filed appropriately," Torres mentioned as they navigated through downtown traffic. "Airport security performed exactly as they should have, and their discretion has been exemplary." Sarah nodded, pleased that her encounter with Derek, Maria, and Janet had been handled professionally at all levels. Good security personnel deserved recognition for doing their jobs correctly, even when they initially made assumptions based on appearances. The safe house where Sarah would spend the night was located in a quiet residential neighborhood that could have housed any number of government workers, think tank researchers, or international business consultants. Her cover for the evening was simple: a hiking enthusiast who worked as a freelance consultant, staying overnight before meetings with potential clients. After Torres departed, Sarah unpacked her hiking gear and civilian clothes, then retrieved her military uniforms from the secure closet that had been maintained during her absence. The transformation from civilian hiking gear to military dress uniform would be complete by tomorrow morning, but tonight she would enjoy her final hours of anonymity. Her secure communication system activated automatically as she settled into the safe house, downloading encrypted messages that had accumulated during her travels. Most were routine updates about ongoing operations, personnel changes, and administrative matters, but one message stood out immediately. General Williams had sent a personal note. "Sarah, your ability to maintain cover while carrying level Omega clearance continues to impress. Tomorrow's briefing involves a situation where your unique skills will be essential. The enemy expects military personnel to look and act like military personnel. They don't expect someone who can disappear into a crowd of hikers, then reappear in a Pentagon briefing room 12 hours later. Rest well, you'll need it." The message was both a compliment and a warning. Sarah understood that her next assignment would likely involve deep cover work in environments where traditional military approaches would be ineffective. Her experience at Denver Airport had been perfect preparation, a reminder that her greatest strength was the ability to be consistently underestimated. Meanwhile, back in Denver, Derek was finishing his shift with a completely new perspective on his job. Every ID he checked, every passenger he screened, now carried the possibility of being someone whose work was vital to national security. The casual dismissal he had shown toward Sarah Martinez would never happen again. "You're being more thorough tonight," Maria observed as Derek carefully examined every passenger's identification. "I learned something important today," Derek replied. "We never know who we're really looking at. That woman this morning taught me that the most important people might be the ones who look the most ordinary." Janet Thompson was updating her security protocols based on the day's events. The encounter with Major Martinez had revealed some gaps in her team's training regarding high-clearance personnel, and she was determined to ensure her agents would be better prepared for similar situations in the future. Back at the DC safe house, Sarah was reviewing technical specifications for communication equipment that would be part of her next mission. The documents were disguised as camping gear catalogs, but they actually contained detailed information about advanced surveillance technology that could be concealed in everyday hiking equipment. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her sister in California. "How were the mountains? Hope you got some good pictures?" Sarah smiled and typed back, "Amazing views. Really helped clear my head. Back to work tomorrow." The message was completely truthful, though her sister would never understand the full meaning behind those simple words. The mountains had indeed provided clarity, and her work tomorrow would indeed be important. But the nature of that work would remain hidden behind the same carefully maintained cover that had made Denver airport security agents chuckle at her appearance. As Sarah prepared for bed, she reflected on how the day's events had reinforced the fundamental principle of her profession. Effective operatives succeeded not because they looked impressive or intimidating, but because they could become invisible in plain sight. Tomorrow, she would walk into one of the most secure buildings in the world and be immediately recognized as Major Sarah Martinez, Special Operations Command, but tonight, she was just another tired traveler resting after a long flight, indistinguishable from thousands of other people spending the night in Washington, D.C., guest houses, hotels, and apartments. The transformation between these two identities was so seamless that even she sometimes marveled at how completely she could inhabit each role. API, computer system in Denver, had declared Special Operations Command when her ID was scanned. But that was only a fraction of who Sarah Martinez really was. Tomorrow's briefing would reveal the rest. At 07:45 hours, Major Sarah Martinez walked through the security checkpoint at the Pentagon, wearing her dress uniform, her hiking boots replaced by polished military footwear, her casual ponytail transformed into regulation grooming standards. The guards who processed her identification showed no surprise at her level Omega clearance. Here, such credentials were part of the daily landscape of American military operations. The transformation was complete, but the lessons from Denver remained fresh in her mind. As she navigated the familiar corridors toward the briefing room, Sarah understood that her ability to shift between identities was precisely why General Williams had requested her presence for this assignment. The briefing room was already occupied when she arrived. General Williams sat at the head of a polished conference table, flanked by Colonel Hayes and 3 other officers Sarah recognized from previous classified operations. Maps of Eastern Europe covered one wall, while digital displays showed real-time intelligence data from various global sources. "Major Martinez," General Williams said as Sarah entered and saluted. "Please take a seat. Your timing is perfect." Sarah settled into her assigned chair, noticing that the other officers present represented different branches of special operations, intelligence analysis, and international coordination. This wasn't a routine briefing. It was a mission planning session for something significant. "Gentlemen, Major Martinez just completed what appeared to be a routine hiking vacation in Colorado," General Williams began, addressing the room. "Yesterday morning, airport security in Denver initially dismissed her credentials because she looked like an ordinary outdoor enthusiast rather than a Special Operations Command officer. That reaction is exactly why she's perfect for what we need to accomplish." Colonel Hayes activated the main display screen, showing photographs of a European city that Sarah immediately recognized as Prague. "Major, we have a situation developing in the Czech Republic. Intelligence indicates that a network of foreign operatives has infiltrated several international hiking and outdoor recreation groups operating in the region." Sarah studied the images carefully. Hiking groups were perfect cover for intelligence operations. They moved freely across borders, accessed remote locations, and attracted little attention from local security services. It was a sophisticated approach that required operatives who could authentically blend into outdoor recreation communities. "These aren't traditional military or intelligence personnel," General Williams continued. "They're using the same techniques you've mastered, appearing completely ordinary while conducting highly classified operations." Local authorities and even our conventional intelligence assets have been unable to identify them because they're looking for people who fit traditional spy profiles. Another officer, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Kim, leaned forward with additional details. The network has been gathering intelligence on NATO communication installations, defense contractor facilities, and military transportation routes throughout Central Europe. Their hiking cover allows them to conduct surveillance activities that would be impossible using conventional methods. Sarah nodded, understanding immediately why her particular skills had been requested. You need someone who can infiltrate their network from within the hiking community. Someone who won't raise suspicions because they genuinely know outdoor recreation and can maintain that cover indefinitely. Exactly, General Williams confirmed. Your Denver airport experience yesterday was actually perfect preparation for this mission. You need to be so convincing as an ordinary hiker that even trained foreign operatives will dismiss you as a civilian enthusiast rather than a military professional. Colonel Hayes provided operational details. You'll enter the Czech Republic as Sarah Martinez, freelance outdoor writer researching hiking trails for an American travel publication. Your cover story is that you're writing articles about European hiking destinations for adventure travel magazines. The mission briefing continued for 2 hours, covering communication protocols, emergency extraction procedures, and specific intelligence targets within the foreign network. Sarah would spend 3 weeks establishing her cover in Prague's hiking community before beginning surveillance operations against the suspected operatives. As the briefing concluded, General Williams asked the other officers to leave the room, indicating she wanted to speak privately with Sarah about the assignment. Major, this mission requires someone who can maintain perfect cover for extended periods while operating completely independently, the general said once they were alone. Your ability to be underestimated because of your appearance is a strategic advantage, but it also means you'll have minimal backup if things go wrong. Sarah understood the implications. Deep cover operations in foreign countries carried risks that couldn't be mitigated through traditional military support structures. Success depended entirely on maintaining her civilian identity while gathering intelligence that could affect NATO security operations. I understand, General. The Denver situation reminded me how effectively people dismiss what they don't expect to see. If foreign operatives are using hiking covers, they'll be looking for other operatives who fit their expectations of military or intelligence personnel. And you don't fit anyone's expectations. General Williams smiled. That's exactly why this mission requires your specific skills. 3 hours later, Sarah was back in civilian clothes, her military uniform replaced by hiking gear appropriate for European trails. Her backpack contained legitimate outdoor equipment, along with communication devices disguised as standard hiking electronics. Her cover identity was supported by published articles she had actually written about Colorado hiking trails, providing authentic background for her freelance writer persona. At Reagan National Airport, Sarah Martinez looked exactly like what she claimed to be, an outdoor writer traveling to research European hiking destinations. The transformation from Special Operations Command officer back to civilian hiker was complete, but this time the hiking cover would serve a mission that could affect international security. As her flight to Prague prepared for departure, Sarah reflected on how perfectly the Denver airport encounter had prepared her for this assignment. Derek, Maria, and Janet had taught her that her greatest professional asset was the ability to be completely ordinary until the moment when being extraordinary became necessary. The computer at Denver had declared Special Operations Command, revealing her true identity to people who understood its significance. But in Prague, her success would depend on ensuring that no computer, no security system, and no trained operative ever suspected that Sarah Martinez was anything more than an enthusiastic hiker with a passion for European trails. The woman who had been dismissed and then respected within the span of an hour was now heading to a mission where being dismissed could mean the difference between success and failure, between gathering vital intelligence and compromising NATO security operations. Major Sarah Martinez had learned to transform her apparent ordinariness into an extraordinary operational advantage. And that skill was about to be tested in one of the most challenging environments special operations had to offer,